The Spearhead campaign kicks off, a deeper look at Ruination Chambers, and using the Pariah Nexus mission pack and Crusade rules. All this and more in White Dwarf issue 502. While it's worth pointing out that White Dwarf issues are now 128 pages, down from 144, so there's a little bit of shrinkflation for ya. Going straight over to the letter from the editor, hi Lyle. He talks about starting off the Spearhead campaign, which is coinciding with the release of the 4th edition of Age of Sigmar. So there'll be a little bit more in here, but basically Spearhead is how you can basically get into the game relatively inexpensively. Next up, we've got the article called Worlds of Warhammer, which takes a little bit of a deeper look at the new Age of Sigmar. Of course, with the new Skaventide box set, the Stormcast Eternals in there are of the Ruination Chamber, which I had to look up why it's called a chamber and not like a legion or a division or an order. But anyway, they're chambers. So the Ruination Chamber basically is a reflection of the Stormcast Eternals who have been reforged so many times that I guess their soul has degraded, like their sense of morality and emotion have all been withered away because, I don't know, hundreds of times dying, it makes them sad or crazy or basically emo. They're emo knights now. The Ruination Chamber takes in all of these multiply reforged soldiers, and that's what we have. The article itself goes into a bit of lore of these kind of bleak citadels that the soldiers can stay in. They become reclusians, and there's these monks that sort of follow them around, or maybe more like scribes, that help remind them of their humanity. But at the end of the day, I guess eventually they can choose not to be reforged anymore and die permanently. Now, if Reddit is to be believed, there's also another chamber called a Sacrosanct Chamber, which, as far as I can tell, is more in the direction of having hope that the Stormcast Eternals' souls can be healed, as opposed to this way more fatalist, even nihilistic view of the Ruination Chamber where they just meh. So I don't know, I think the lore is a little eh. I would like to see more of the Sacrosanct Chamber if that is a real thing, but let me know what you think. We then move over into a bunker update. Apparently the Warhammer bunker is now a year old, and they've had multiple campaigns, the Slide Crown Sundering as such, throughout this, and now they're jumping into yet another campaign called the Spearhead campaign. But they also want to hear from other bunkers around the world, so if you are part of a big gaming club that participates in bunker events, or you just play in your own basement with some friends, it all counts, and so the White Dwarf team says they want to hear your stories about your bunker experience. And the July challenge is to paint rank and file. Okay, so a little more information on the Spearhead League. So this article outlines the general framework that they want to have for the Spearhead League. You gain points by playing games, you gain points by fighting different opponents and winning, all of that, and you use the Spearhead boxes. So that is just the name of what the new box sets are for all Age of Sigmar armies. And the idea is that the box inside has a completely balanced, playable army, and you can just take that, paint it all up in a weekend, learn the rules, and have games that you play. They're supposed to only take about an hour, so the whole selling point is that they are quick and very easy to get into. The lists are locked, so there's no list building options really. You're just, whatever you pick off the shelf is what you play with. And it's funny because they've been tracking data on sort of who plays what, and like over 25% of the players or games have all been with Gloomspite Gitz and Sons of Behemoth. I don't know, it looks kind of fun. It made me wonder whether or not it would be worth jumping in and buying my own Spearhead box. I've been eyeballing those Night Haunt for a long time. So I did what any good gamer does, and I went over to Reddit and learned that it's apparently the worst box you can buy, so never mind. Okay, jumping into the 40k mission this month, it's called Encroaching Doom. It mostly has to do with like pre and post game mechanics. You pick a couple of infantry units, it has to be infantry, and they can gain the infiltrate ability, and a couple of other units you can pick, infantry, that gain the scout ability. You also are supposed to pick just any unit in your army to be a potential savior. And what does that mean? Well, you play your game as normal, hold objectives, all that, but at the very end of the game, if the model that you marked as the potential savior is within range of an objective zone, you get like 20 extra VP. So it's maybe like a way of pulling a win out at the end, hence potentially saving your game. That's what I'm guessing. And the Age of Sigmar battle plan this month is called Escalation. Next up, we've got a Warcry article. There is a campaign arc called Paths of the Chosen. There's some power of Talaxis, some great mighty power that you can either try to claim for yourself or hide away and prevent others from getting there. So it's, I guess, up to 8 people can play this campaign, and they have these different origins as laid out on a map. And actually, the map comes in poster form, so you can have that up in your gaming club to see the origins of each player, I guess. Also, on the flip side of that, there's actually all of the realms listed out, so that's actually kind of handy. Next up, we jump into basic training with more Age of Sigmar stuff. By Your Command lists out several different scenarios in which you can use your command points to deliver commands for various different things, covering fire, countercharge, etc. Next up, Dan at the Hobby Hangout has a painting lexicon. So this article doesn't necessarily describe a new painting technique so much as it sets a standard that they are going to be using going forward for describing painting techniques. So they're giving specific phrases or words. So technique is to specifically mean how you paint a model, and that can relate to airbrushing or stippling or just using your paintbrush, normal stuff like that. Then you have result, which is designed to be the desired effect. So you're getting a base coat, you're doing highlights, something like that. That's your result. And then color is pretty self-explanatory. It's just the name of the paint being used. And that can be a layer paint, a base paint, a technical paint, whatever. And I think the idea behind it is as new players join the hobby, this gives everybody kind of the same starting point to understand articles and follow along with what you're doing, because, painting is kind of one of the first starting places for people into the hobby. Next up, it is a full Age of Sigmar battle report called Hour of Ruin. We have the Stormcast Eternals versus the Skaven, and the Warhammer team ended up breaking out into 2 Bens versus 2 Matts. So I rooted for the 2 nerdy guys. The next article is called Rules of Engagement, and this talked to the development team about the changes made to the 4th edition of Age of Sigmar. They talk about why they came up with the Spearhead box sets and how they really wanted to revolve the game around being balanced for that. So you play these games, they have a bunch of comeback mechanics that are now incorporated into your play. They've normalized some other things. There's now a universal combat range. You lose almost all of your shooting in combat from what I can see as well. But the article goes pretty in-depth into a lot of the smaller changes that were made to Age of Sigmar, so I'm guessing this is really good if you are going from the old edition into the new edition, and this gives you a bit of a primer as to what the major changes are. All right, next up we have Skaventide, where they talk to the miniature designers behind the Skaventide box. So the article discusses the design elements that went into each of the factions. Of course, with the Stormcast Eternals leaning more into a Ruination Chamber, the iconography on them is changed to be a bit more like skull-based instead of Sigmar's proud face. They have tattered robes now, and the suggested painting is to have more muted colors. Whereas with the Skaven, they really leaned into a lot of the idea of wretched. Specifically, wretched was kind of one of the keywords they used. One of the cool things I read in here, though, is every single Skaven model in here is completely unique. So you're not going to see any repeat models in here. And there are 74 models in the box set, so that's a lot of modeling that got done. And kudos to the design team. And of course, they look amazing. The article then follows up with a painting guide called Paint Splatter that gives you suggestions on how you can paint up your Skaventide box. All right, we made it to page 98 of 128, and we finally hit some 40K. This one is a story in the Warzone Chalnath. It's a Tau-based story. We have the Xeno War, which is a sort of historical account in the Chalnath Expanse, kind of going over the Tau's taking of, they expand, they have an expansionist nation, They go to different planets and they are colonizing it. So they're actually taking land, or planets really, from the Imperium. At the same time, the Imperium is also dealing with Genestealer cult uprisings, which means the Tower dealing with Genestealer cult uprisings, and there is only war. Then we jump into another Tau article called Beyond Empire, where we follow Eldsoren, whose force is allied with the Kroot. It's a bit of an uneasy alliance as they take more land from the poor, helpless Astra Militarum of the Imperium. It's brutal, man. Then we have Echoes from the Warp. Dave and Josh kind of discuss the design ideas behind the new Pariah Nexus mission pack, which is the chapter-approved mission pack that's now out. There was a lot of discussion, kind of discusses the philosophy of what went behind the design, changing it from the Leviathan mission pack into the Pariah Nexus, what worked, what didn't work, and how they changed it. So the big things that they kind of go over is they wanted fixed missions and tactical missions to be a lot more even. Apparently in the last edition, the Leviathan stuff, people played tactical and then largely migrated to fixed. So I think they wanted to keep that more of a balance here. They also did away with gambits. Now you have secret missions, which are supposed to be far more attainable. And in reading this, I've participated in a tournament that utilized the Pariah Nexus mission pack. And the things I personally noticed, it's one tournament with like 32 dudes, right? But what I noticed is most people still went with tactical missions, and because the new mission pack allows you to swap out missions that don't work from turn to turn a lot easier, that still seems to edge out fixed missions. Also, I didn't really see anybody taking on any secret missions, but that was just my experience in it. I think a lot of people didn't want to deal with that or try figuring that out. But it was also pretty new whenever we did the tournament. So I appreciate what they're doing. I appreciate them trying to go for balance. It'll be interesting to see if people end up sticking with fixed missions. Then we get into the next article, Pariah Nexus Crusades. And this is exactly as it says. It lays out special rules. There's like a mission sequence that it offers for incorporating the secondary missions of the Pariah Nexus mission pack into your Crusade games. So I guess that might add some variety for those Crusade players out there. And the last article in the issue is called The Dead Marshes. It's a modeling article on the Lord of the Rings. So it actually talks about creating the Dead Marshes. And it's a really interesting article on how they create that. And yeah, it was neat because it reminded me of the movie in the Dead Marshes, don't follow the lights. And that wraps up White Dwarf issue 502. Very Age of Sigmar heavy, so a lot to learn if you are into that, how the Ruination Chambers work, the cool modeling design behind the new Stormcast Eternals, as well as the Skaven. The Skaven do look genuinely amazing. Plus a cool game design article on how they, decided to make those changes they did to Age of Sigmar. And then a very tiny bit of 40k, not a lot for you there unless you're really into Tau, but who cares about them? So it is what it is. And then that teeny little snippet, little beauty mark of Lord of the Rings for you. So let me know what your favorite article in here was, and we will see you next time.